Ladies and gentlemen, our program is about to begin.
America, 1846, an audacious idea to grow and broadcast more knowledge than the world had ever seen. With an eye to the future, that dream was the Smithsonian, your Smithsonian. Expanding the portrait of a people, revealing the building blocks of life, to discover new species and save those we already know. A knowledge powerhouse with purpose and a community mindset. Inspiring a new generation to learn from the past. Speak up. Be civic. Serve a nation. So that together we can step into the future with optimism. No dreams deferred.
Thank you for joining us for the Smithsonian's National Education Summit. Now, please welcome Smithsonian Undersecretary for Education, Dr. Monique Chisholm.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. How is everyone? Good. Yes, welcome to your Smithsonian, and welcome to the 3rd Annual National Smithsonian Education Summit. I know the lights are down, but just by show of hands, I can still see you. How many educators, teachers do we have in the room tonight? Yes, let's give them. This summit is for you. Actually, everything that we do here as educators, the Smithsonian educators, we do for you. So thank you for being here to celebrate and honor teachers with us. So let me first just give a verbal description of who I am and what I'm wearing. Today I'm in a navy blue jumpsuit. My hair is curly. I'm very tall, and I'm here at the Hirshhorn National Museum of the Hirshhorn Art and Sculpture Garden in the auditorium. And that verbal description is for anyone who might need it. I also would like to say that we are here to celebrate the accomplishments that have happened over the last several days. I want to make sure to get to that, but first I would like to do a land acknowledgement to say that we gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples on whose lands we hold this event and the events across the nation, and want to say that we give thanks and gratitude to the many Native peoples who make their home across the nation today. So to start off with that land acknowledgement. We also have been trying to improve our accessibility options, and so we have many things throughout the summit. Our ASL interpreters, we have closed captioning. If you are online or if you're here in person and need some accommodations, please let us know, and we'll make sure that you have the things that you need to participate fully. Well, first off, you know that to put on something like this, you have to have an army of people. And the captain, the general of this army has been Ashley Naranjo, and I want to give a special thanks to her. For all of her hard work and dedication and perseverance for everything that will come to fruition. There's a huge team behind the summit that I won't go through each and every individual person, but I want you to have a chance to see them. I'm so grateful to each and every person for all of the hard work that they put in. People have been working for months to make sure that we have a dynamic experience. I'm also really happy to say that we have a lot of collaborators, different organizations who are joining us over the course of the next 3 days to make sure that we can bring excellent resources, information, networking opportunities to our participants. And so thank you to all of our collaborating organizations. And then we also would not be able to do many of the things that we're doing without our sponsors. And so a very special thank you to our sponsors, make sure that you stop by the Arts and Industry Building because we have 700 pounds of candy. Yes, that we are not taking home with us. So please, please, please take home. So I want to talk, before we get into the panel tonight, a little bit about the theme, Together We Thrive, Fostering a Sense of Belonging. I had the great opportunity to work with great colleagues like David Osher, who's here tonight at AIR, on a body of work called The Science of Learning and Development. And through that research, they asked a key question about, can students thrive? So many of us here in the audience and online know that this is a duh question. Yes, if you're an educator, you believe that all students have the potential to thrive. But thank goodness we had some researchers that came together to ask this key question, and now we have scientific evidence that given the right conditions, the right environment, the right opportunities to learn, all students have the potential to thrive. And we know here at the Smithsonian, we are very fortunate that we have so many different units that focus on art, history, science, and culture. And we are very fortunate to have over 300 educators who are focused on bringing resources to the world, to the nation. But we also know that our success depends on us coming together to work together to thrive. And so this notion of thriving has really centered me in the role that I have as undersecretary. You know, to thrive means to persevere, even in times of difficulty. To thrive means to reach new goals. To thrive means to grow. And so we are focused on coming together to ensure that not only the adults in our ecosystems, but the students in particular have all of the things that they need to thrive. The fostering a sense of belonging, for me, has been a very special journey. I've grown very concerned over the last couple of years about the state of our nation. I'm usually a very optimistic person, glass half full, really encouraged by all the opportunities that are before us. And I have to say that I'm still that person, but every now and then I start to wonder, are we really going to make it through all the things that we're going through as a nation? We've had multiple pandemics, the COVID pandemic, a racial pandemic. We've had an economic downturn. We're seeing in our school systems that students on their test scores are actually performing at the lowest that we have ever seen in decades. We know that there is a social-emotional connection that is lacking for both students and adults, and we're seeing our teachers leave the profession at numbers that we have never seen before. So I am concerned, and one of the ways that I know that we can solve this, and I think the Smithsonian is a strong intervention, is that to create this sense of belonging, this sense of connection. I know that when people see themselves in what they're learning, when they feel connected to the environment, when they know that somebody sees them and can acknowledge them and has hope for them just in the same way that they have hope for themselves, that we can help them thrive. And so over the course of the next 3 days, we will be having various conversations about fostering a sense of belonging. And as we came together to think through this panel for tonight, I was so fortunate to have Secretary Lonnie Bunch say to me, you know, wherever you need me to utilize me, please go ahead and utilize me. And so I started thinking about the experience of Black male youth. And I know that as an educator, I've been an educator my entire life, started off as a teacher, then went to state policy, then at the US Department of Education, now here. I know from that experience that when we look at the performance of African American youth on standard measures, academic achievement, there's a significant achievement gap. Suspension and expulsion rates, disproportionately African American males are identified for suspension and expulsion. Graduation rates, our African American male students are significantly behind the all average. When you look at going to college and then actually graduating from college, on almost every single indicator, unfortunately, we could still use race and gender as a predictor of performance, and we have to interrupt that. We have to stop it. And so I wanted to have a conversation to start us off tonight to think about fostering a sense of belonging from the experience of Black male youth. And I thought, who better to do that than actual men who have achieved extraordinary success in their careers. So without further ado, let me welcome the panel to the stage. Secretary Lonnie G. Bunch III, Jamar Roundtree, and Curtis Valentine.
I get to hang out with the cool kids.
Welcome, gentlemen. Ooh, that's loud. How are you tonight?
Always good.
Great, great. I thought we would start off by having each of you just tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to that role. So, Secretary Bunch, do you want to start?
Oh. Well, it's easy. I'm a historian, and I never learned to say no. And I think that for me, it really is, as an educator, I began to think about where could I have the most impact as an educator. And I realized that museums were places that allowed you to talk to amazing diversity of people, different generations, and that in essence, museums were at the heart of lifelong learning. And so for me, I've really been lucky. I went to school forever and got to work in the Smithsonian as a very young scholar, and have been here most of my career.
Great, thank you, thank you. Jamar Roundtree is our DC Teacher of the Year. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Thank you for that. I appreciate you. I, just like you, have been in school, it seems like forever. My younger years, I went to 8 different elementary schools. I went to 5 different middle schools and 5 different colleges. So I loved education, but in a different way. Education and school was my home. That is where I made my friends. That is where I learned to be who I am today. And it taught me the valuable lessons that I hopefully teach my students. And it was a place that I found a foundation. That was my foundation, being in school. Because I went to so many, I had to learn really quickly how to adapt to certain situations. And through those experiences, I've been able to kind of relate to different children in different ways. And so I can see myself in the students that I teach. And so that's why I'm here.
Great, wonderful. And Curtis Valentine, who's the founder of an organization called Real Men Teach. Curtis, tell us about your background.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a tremendous honor. As you'd imagine, the 3 of us get asked this question a lot. And my answer changes, honestly, the more I learn about myself, my own history. I could tell you my full name is Curtis Chavis Valentine. I'm a relative of the first Black person to ever attend college in America. John Chavis attended what was then Princeton University in 1795. I'm also a descendant of Beverly Valentine. My great-grandfather and great-grandmother Mary are co-founders of a Rosenwald School, 3.5 hours south of here in Bracy, Virginia. They also had a genes teacher, so if you all know about American history, you know about that. I'm also connected to William Valentine, who was the headmaster of the Manual Training School in Bordentown, New Jersey, which was the only all-Black public boarding school in the North. And so all the work I've done in my life, I realized I didn't choose education, education chose me. But if you ask me that question in an elevator, I would tell you, like the secretary, I'm just a kid from Jersey who was surrounded by particularly men who would not let me fail. No matter where I went, barbershop, church, the football field, the basketball court, I was asked a question about where are you going to college? Every day from the time I can remember to the time I stepped foot on Morehouse College campus. And so I'm someone who's trying to recreate that reality in this country to make sure that no student does not have the love and connection that I have, and that's why I started Real Men Teach.
Wonderful.
And let's be clear. You left out the most important part.
What's that?
Jersey.
Jersey. Yeah. So I started off with, I'm a Jersey boy through and through, so when I found Secretary was from Jersey and started the African American Museum, it was no surprise. We do what we do.
I was told there's going to be a lot of talk about Jersey up here.
Yeah, we'll balance it out, Jamar, don't worry. Okay. So I want to kind of dive right into the theme of belonging. And when you look at the research base on belonging, it talks about a number of different aspects, a psychological well-being. It talks about a cultural dimension of belonging. Also talks about the school and educational space. But at the core of it, the research shows that a strong sense of belonging is associated with higher levels of satisfaction, happiness, and overall well-being. So I want you to go back. I know for some of you, you're going to have to go back a little further.
Thanks a lot.
A little further. Go back to when you were young, and tell me, what kind of student were you? And did you have a sense of belonging in school? So talk to me a little bit about that.
Oh, me?
Let's start with you, Secretary Bunch. Yeah.
Well, I'm fortunate. I'm the son of 2 teachers, and that says it all. That education was central to our lives, and that, in essence, my sense of belonging did not come in school. It didn't come playing sports. It came from my family. That sense that, much like you, my family would start out every conversation, not when you're going to college, where you're going to graduate school. So there was always that expectation. I know, the kid next door got to go to the Navy. I had to go to graduate school. But what I realized was that part of what was so important to me is that I grew up one of the few black kids in the town. And so therefore, I couldn't expect that sense of belonging to come from anywhere other than my own family. So for me, having father and mother who stressed education, who taught that education was your way to battle anything that faced you, and who basically used history and science to basically realize that you can dip into those 2 disciplines and find answers to everything you needed as you move forward. So my sense of belonging came from family first, family second, anything left over, family third.
Curtis, what about you?
As I mentioned before, as a child, I had been privy to, again, my history, the Valentine, the Chavis family. I would go down to our home country where we have, even to this day, 130 acres of land. And so I was very connected to who I was, where I came from, and human potential. Even though both my parents were not college graduates, they've had, like a lot of us, high expectations for one another. Grew up in New Jersey, as I said, a very diverse community, and honestly did not have many black male educators. But the community itself, again, I couldn't go next door. I couldn't go down the street without seeing someone speaking about my future even before I could even self-actualize. But also, they were talking about HBCUs. They were talking about colleges. Even though I was only a stone's throw from Rutgers University, I did not feel a sense of belonging to that institution. And that's where I teach now at the University of Maryland. That's a very big part of the work I'm trying to do, is to make sure that students, particularly in Prince George's County, Maryland, where I'm formerly on the school board, don't feel so detached from a university that sits right in our space. And so I always felt belonging. I was a smaller kid, wore glasses, braces. You really can't see it right now, but sort of a late bloomer, but was very confident. I had an older sister who was also very confident. But I just want to shout out Carl Wade, who's my middle school principal, who's a black man and someone who really, I get choked up about it because he saw so much in me. And he's a part of the work that we're doing right now. He can see what I'm doing. And what he would do is, even though at the time I spoke with a stutter, you probably can't tell that now, but when people would come into the school, to visit the school, he would call me down to the office and ask me to give them the tour. And I would walk them around the building, and I would tell them where the cafeteria was and where the library was. And he would even come along with us, and I would bring him back to them, and he'd have his meeting. So he was, even in that point, putting me in spaces where I had to speak, where I had to learn how to present myself. But I believe it was because who he was. He was a Hampton grad, no offense, Mr. Secretary. But he was a Hampton grad, but he was preaching Hampton University from day one. But he saw something in me I didn't see in myself, and that's really the power of black male educators, particularly for black boys like us.
Jamar, what about for you?
It's hard to go after these two, I tell you that right now. I'm the opposite. I'm the opposite of both of them. My family was not into education. My father didn't graduate high school. My mother graduated high school, but didn't go on to anything else after that. I'm the first of my household to go to college, to finish high school. I am... Thank you. It's when I think about a sense of belonging, it wasn't my family. It was outside my family where that sense of belonging came into play. I played sports, and so I played sports. but my family didn't have the funds to send me to organized sports, so I played in the hood. We played on the street. That's where my sense of belonging came from. That's when I first acquired that sense of belonging, but that can only take you so far. My really sense of belonging, and really that tipped the edge of me getting into education, was when I joined the Boys and Girls Club. Hit them up. Got to keep putting that money into those organizations. So I quickly got into, as a 14-year-old, I got my first job working in the locker room. And I was managing the locker room. So as you can probably tell, it's sweaty and guys are walking in and out. And I'm just like, hey, don't go in that locker. That was my job. Don't you go stealing from there. That's my job. But quickly, I quickly moved up. I was also, while being in the locker room, I saw a lot of young kids come in from sporting outings and like not really being themselves when they come back in. That gave me an opportunity to talk to them. It gave me an opportunity to connect. So I quickly moved up in the ranks at the Boys and Girls Club. I moved up to the game room, which is the big deal because like now you're in control of the game room. Who doesn't want to do that? And I was able to see some of the different attitudes of kids when they came in from school, or when they came in from being outside or from other sporting events. So I was able to connect and see what those attitudes look like. But then I was also able to change them, because if I can see that, I can be like, hey, come on over here. I'm going to give you an extra $1 so you can go ahead and play this game for a little bit longer. Right? That just extra step. And that made them feel like that was a sense of belonging. So that was the first time that I really felt a sense of belonging. Then I moved up to the front desk where I'm controlling everything. I'm like, yeah, I got the locker room, I got the game room, I got the other one. Yeah. And I could handle money. So I got a chance to also work on my personal skills with dealing with money, customers, right? This is the first time I had to say no or yes to people, and then also handle money. So the Boys and Girls Club outside of the school was the main place where I found a sense of belonging. And that took me into wanting to work with kids.
So it's really interesting that all three of you described that first sense of connection or belonging for two of the panelists coming from family in the community, for you, Jamar, coming from the Boys and Girls Club. So it strikes me that school wasn't necessarily the immediate place where that connection happened. When we think about, from your professions and the work that you do, when you look at, I talked at the very beginning about some of the metrics that we have around achievement, suspension and expulsion rates, graduation rates, going on to college attrition, and also college graduation. We know that for many of our youth, Black male youth across the nation, that they're growing up in situations where they don't necessarily have the opportunities that maybe we were provided and that you've talked about here, or don't see an opportunity or a light. Can you help us just from your perspective and the work that you do, what do you see as some of the biggest barriers that are facing Black male youth today?
And we're going to let you start because you always get left out. Right?
If I take it back to my high school years, and high school Jamar is a complete animal. It's a different beast. Because again, while school was my foundation of a place where I love to go, there was not a lot of representation in my school of people who looked like me. And so that sense of connection I had to find and reach and really look for in the school system. Shout out to Daryl Parker. He was my sixth grade and then followed me all the way up sub. He wasn't even a teacher that had a foundation at the school. He just subbed in the different buildings. He was the first African-American male to reach out to me and want to see a better future for me. He was the person that would push me, and I only saw him, when he subbed the class. But his daughter went to school with me. And so he would be around. He would, when he saw me in the hall, he'd be like, hey, you cutting up? I go, no, not today.
Not today.
Yeah, right, not today. Maybe yesterday. But he saw something in me, like you were saying. He saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. But that was the first teacher and educator to be able to show me that. Otherwise, I was going through the motions. By junior year of high school, I wasn't sure if I was going to go to college. College wasn't even on my brain. I knew I wanted to play college ball, but I wasn't sure how to get there. And I was a really good athlete. So I thought football was going to take me there, right? Because I'm so good. Like, I'm going to the NFL. It's happening. I'm telling you right now. But no one showed me how to get there. And so I remember sitting down with Penn State. I was like, okay, what am I supposed to do? They were like, oh yeah, you look great on film, like all these things. And then they were like, how are your grades? And I go, what? What do you mean? I can't just go on like my own athleticism. Like, what are you talking about? They're like, no, let me see your grades. And I've never been shut down so quick, and so embarrassed, because I just didn't know. Like, my parents weren't talking about it. I had nobody else to talk to about this. And in my brain, I was like, I got to do something more to make colleges look at, like, that was when the light bulb went off. But I was so defeated, I was like, I'm not going to college. That's just it. That's it. I remember like it was yesterday. I walked out and I bumped into Mr. Parker because he's like 7'5". I was like, oh, huh? And he's like, you okay? I go, I don't know. And he saw that, and I kind of walked away with my head down, and he followed up with me the very next day. He was like, you okay? I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do here. He's like, whatever it is. I didn't even tell him what it was. He was like, whatever it is, focus, work hard, and get it done. And that, from here on in, that drives me, because I'm a go-getter. I've always been a hard worker. But getting it done is what I needed to do, because nobody else was going to do it for me, right? And until that moment, nobody else was really trying to help me. I was already going through the motions as an African-American kid in public schools and getting pushed along, because I was in the 10th grade but couldn't read very well. So I needed to get it done.
So what I hear you saying is two main things, right? So perhaps you didn't see college as a vision for yourself, one barrier. Two, you didn't have a blueprint. You didn't have a pathway. You didn't kind of know how to navigate the system.
No.
Okay. So two really specific barriers. Thank you for that. Curtis or Secretary Bunch, what barriers do you see are present for African American male youth today?
I would say it's twofold. It's how people see us and how we see ourselves. And so I just want to start off with two pieces of research. Just today, the Brookings Institute just published a study that showed that the benefits of African American educators is even greater than we expected. So there's always a study that says if you have an educator who looks like you, I'll just sort of be more general, outcomes for you, student achievement, college entrance, behavior goes up. But what this study says that having someone who looks like you, not as your classroom teacher, but on your team of teachers, or even on the same grade level, benefits the student. Because having a teacher of color is going to also hold white teachers accountable and expose them to that particular cohort of folks, even though you're not necessarily in their classroom. And so the idea that having a black male educator on the staff in the same grade level, whether that's a teacher or not, impacts students. And so teachers will see students differently when they're connecting with someone who looks like them. That's one piece of data. Another piece of research is called collective teacher efficacy. For years, we talked about the greatest impact on student achievement was the education of the parent. That was always sort of the greatest denominator. If you do a regression analysis, you'll be able to say this is the greatest predictor of student success. But this new research is saying that the collective belief, not only in your classroom teacher, but the teachers on your grade level, math, reading, science, the collective belief that you can do it. That when I see you, I see the potential, that I don't see you as a zip code or race or gender or background or your mom didn't or your dad didn't, but I believe, and you mentioned this earlier, I was going to push back a bit, the idea that if you're an educator, you believe that all students can succeed. Unfortunately, that's not true. Not all teachers think all students can achieve at the same level. And oftentimes students walk in and you get okay, you're from this community, your mom looks like this, you're from this community, your mom looks like that, and then students are starting from that point. And so when you walk in the room, if I'm starting out from a deficit, I have to prove myself. I'm already in the hole. And that's sort of how people see us. The other part is how we see other people. And this idea really, the impetus of Real Men Teach is that when we ask people, if you want to become an educator, the first thing they think about is educators they've had. And you're like, you know what? Teaching may be cool, but all my teachers were not nice to me. They were combative, they were not open. And guess what? They weren't even being themselves. And I could tell because I saw them on the weekend. And they were totally different people. And I'm like, I like this Mr. Johnson. I like the weekend one, who wears his Jordans and shows his tattoos and is being his authentic self. It's not hiding. What you also do is you give students to be their authentic self. And that they don't have to hide. And you'd be surprised when people walk in and they start talking about their hobbies and all the things they do when they're not teaching. And then you start drawing connections. And so if we really want the students to look at teaching as a profession, we have to unleash all the shackles that we've had as adults to say, we have to dress this way. We can't talk about this part of our personal life because we believe that it's unacceptable socially. And give students the opportunity to know who we are, but also give them permission to be who they are. Opposite that, we're going to have people walking in the room, hiding, showing our representatives, and not really showing who they are. And so it's important, again, twofold, that people see young students, particularly black boys, having the utmost human potential, but also them seeing themselves in their educators so that they can one day want to be them.
For me, it's about assumptions and expectations. There's always this amazing moment when black males go from being cute to being criminals. Often teachers talk about how wonderful it was when you were in 3rd grade or 5th grade. Suddenly you hit 7th grade, you start getting taller, and there is this assumption that you're no longer the kid that's going to be successful. You're going to be the kid that's going to be in jail. And I see that time and time again, and that gives people live up to expectations. And I think that's one of the great challenges. And I think the other is this notion that the assumption that you have to find, the assumption that school can provide the reservoir that you need to move forward. I would always argue that school is part of a community that allows you to do that. In my own life, school was never a place that said I could be successful. From the time I went to the school as the only black kid, it was, you need to go into work in print shop because you shouldn't go to college, because black kids can't go to college. And even when I applied to go to Howard, my senior year in high school, suddenly in that summer that I was getting ready to go to Howard, Howard said, well, we can't accept you, you haven't sent your grades in. And I went to the high school and they didn't send the grades because they thought somebody black wouldn't go to college. So it wasn't until August 15th that I actually carried my grades to Howard, so they let me in that September. And so it really is those expectations. And for me, it was really countering that, and I go back to family. I had a grandfather that was a sharecropper, but he decided that that wasn't the life for him, and he went to Shaw 10 years at night to get a BA. He then decided to come to Howard and be a dentist. He went to Howard for 3 years, came back to New Jersey, and they said, they're not going to accept a black college's dental degree. So he said, where's the best dental school in the country? They said, University of Chicago. He went again, 3 years in Chicago, came back in 1920, and they said, you can practice now in New Jersey. Now the downside of that, I'm Lonnie III. So my father and I would hear that story. So every time I'd come home going, man, school is tough. This girl broke my heart. I dropped the touchdown pass, and they'd say, your grandfather went to dental school twice. So that really gave you sort of expectations. And so it really was that internal challenge, never from a teacher, never from a coach. It is that sense of, if your grandfather went to dental school twice, you can go ahead and do this term paper.
That's right.
And so I think that, to me, was really the key to sort of my success.
Those are amazing stories, and what I'm capturing from a lot of what was just shared is that many of the barriers are around expectations, a culture of low expectations, maybe really focusing on that collective efficacy, Curtis, that you mentioned, the mindset that teachers need to have. I guess I should have said all good teachers know that all students can thrive. So I'll use that qualifier from now on. As we think about those barriers, those definitely seem like things that we can work on, that we can solve. There are also some very real systemic barriers, just access to resources, access to safe schools, access to high quality, effective teachers. There are some real barriers, some real systemic barriers. And I think places like the Smithsonian and other museum and cultural institutions actually can be a place where learning continues to happen in an exciting way, a way where there's discovery and innovation and curiosity, and where you can start to see yourself represented. So talk to me a little bit. Did you go to museums when you were growing up? Were there other, Jamara, you mentioned the Boys and Girls Club. Are there other cultural organizations or institutions where you found representation or you found a connection? And, Secretary Bunch, did you go to museums?
So, no. I was too busy playing ball. But I'll tell you my museum story. 6th grade, they take us from New Jersey to go to the cloisters in New York City. And in 6th grade, you study about knights in armor. So suddenly the cloisters had all these suits of armor. Now, we had always been told that that would make you strong. So I ended up knocking over suits of armor in the cloisters and got kicked out. So that was my first museum experience, getting kicked out. My second museum experience was that I was in high school and there was something called the New Jersey Historical Society. And I wanted to do research. I was interested in history. And it was in this big old house with this wonderful wooden door with a big glass frame. And so I actually put on my leather sweater, brought my new notebook, and took the bus down and went to the New Jersey Historical Society, and I knocked on the door, and there was this amazingly blonde woman who looked up, saw me, and looked down. So I figured she couldn't have seen me, because, I'm ready. I got a haircut and everything. So I turned so she can see my letter. I'm a football letterman. And she looked up, and she waved me away. And I realized that museums must be special if they wave you away. And so for me, my whole career was shaped by getting inside something that must be important if they didn't want you there. And so for me, museums became both sort of, my civil rights struggle, but it also became a place where I realized that there was different kind of learning. There were opportunities to engage history in art and science different from in the classroom. There was an opportunity to sort of really bring those disciplines together. The best museums weren't simply silos. They brought together history, art, culture, science. And so that got me excited as a student, and it really became my passion to make museums both live up to their educational opportunity, but also to make sure they were truly democratic, that they really were places that ensured people to not only see themselves, but to understand their place in a broader society.
Can I just ask you to build, I'm going to go to the next two gentlemen also, but can I ask you to build on that? Because here at the Smithsonian, we have a strategic initiative focused around our shared future. What does that mean for you? Why is it important to focus on our shared future? And how can a museum, serve in that capacity?
I think whenever a nation is in crisis, its institutions, cultural, education, have to step up. And that in some ways, the Smithsonian is this amazing reservoir of history, art, culture. But it also ought to be a reservoir that people can dip into to live their lives better, to understand the things that divide us, to find reason to think about climate change as personal, not just sort of institutional. And that for me, it was recognizing that the Smithsonian, like many cultural institutions, has an array of material that will allow us to find a shared future, that will allow us to understand that the things that divide us are real. But places like the Smithsonian can help us find understanding, maybe even a little hope. So our shared future is really saying that the Smithsonian has to be as much about today and tomorrow as it is about yesterday. And by doing that, you become that educational reservoir that allows people to find a way to believe that things can be better. Believe that you can use history to challenge yourself, to demand a country live up to its stated ideals, to use science in a way that sparks innovation and brightens up a person's possibility. So for me, the Smithsonian really is this amazing place, but it ought to do so much more. It really ought to be the glue that holds a nation together. And I'll believe that until they run me out.
Jamar and Curtis, were museums and there was a whole bunch of things, right? There were a whole bunch of things that I was going to say, but I'm like, I'm not going to say those right now. So, were museums, cultural institutions, connections in your community, historical societies, did those play any role in your life? No. Okay.
I don't know why we have to go after him. Let us go first. No, so if you could think back, and I'm asking everybody in the crowd to think back to your favorite trip, right? It's probably 8th grade, I think, 8th grade, or maybe it's 5th grade. I'm not really sure when they take you, but I think it's 8th grade, and that's when you probably get your experience to go to Washington D.C. Right? You take that big trip down here with like all your friends, and you get to experience new things because you probably never went to a museum in your other hometowns, or they didn't have museums that you can go to for free. I missed those. I was either I was suspended, or I didn't have the grades enough to be on that trip. So I didn't experience museums until actually I was an adult. I think it was 19 or 20 years old when I first made my trip down this way to actually experience museums in that way. And that was just one small sliver of seeing the museums. When I moved down here, that's when I truly experienced the museums, but in a different way. I was like a kid in a candy store. I was just, all the knowledge was just flowing and running, and I was just like, what is happening? This is a museum? But as an educator, it is so fun to watch. It's so much fun to watch the kids explore. It's so much fun to have them not only explore their own history, but also ask questions, to be mesmerized by, wait, I thought I knew this, but are you telling me this is what happened? Or this is what they're telling us what happened. Is this what really happened? And then I started to do this thing. It's like, you know what? I got to do some research myself. I don't really know. And so it's changed because I didn't have this when I was growing up. And experiencing it as an adult kind of shifts your mindset a little bit. And when they opened the African American History Museum, I cannot tell you how many times I signed up on the list to get a ticket. It was just, you've been there. You've been there. But the first time walking in, it's just mind-blowing. But I start at the bottom. I don't know if you start at the top. I don't know if you've ever been there, but I start at the bottom. And the bottom always gives me something new to think about. It always gives me something new to think about and to actually go back and like do some research as to what was I told, and what was actually the history.
Oh.
Right? Or vice versa. What are they saying in this museum? And then what actually happened, right? Because people tell you things, right? That's why it's called his story, right? People tell you things, right? Like, his story is his story, sometimes. And so that museum really opened my horizon around really diving a little bit more deeper into my own history, my own people's history. So.
I know somebody who can get you tickets for the museum. So.
I hope so. You see me up here, get me in.
Well, what that really is, it's a plug for membership. You're a member, you get it anytime you want to.
There we go.
I'm a member.
All right, Curtis, thank you.
I'm just saying.
We'll just sit back.
I didn't have to say that.
Back,
you know, that's good.
Does this come with a membership? Because I feel like it should.
I'll get you in, brother.
I want to answer your question, but I do want to just really quickly get back to this sense of belonging and belief. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't want to even glance over where we are in this day and age where we're having conversations around book banning, about censorship. And in the end, I think years from now, students, particularly white students, are going to look back on this time and they're going to say, they didn't believe in me. My parents, the educators, the policymakers didn't believe I could learn about this history and be able to process it without them having to control that. They didn't believe that when I read stories about the history of America, that I would not identify necessarily with the slaveholder, but with white abolitionists. That hearing about stories that it wouldn't make me feel guilty, it make me feel empowered that John Brown looked like me. And so this belief is not only lack of belief in black children, it's lack of belief in white children. That you could not, at this day and age, process this history in a way that understood that it was not your fault, but it actually guides everything that you see around you. Your point around museums, I did not grow around, I think, artifacts, but I grew up around a strong oral history and a lived history. So I'm there, my mom is from Georgia, my dad's from Virginia, and I'm listening to stories. I'm always very inquisitive. And I had stories about what life was like on the farm, around selling crops, racism, education, all the things that I think museums, when I walked into the African American Museum like yourself, I was able to sort of touch them. But we had photographs everywhere. We had opportunities to go down south and to see the sort of dilapidated homes. I mentioned that I'm a descendant of a Rosenwald School founder. I've seen the Rosenwald School over 100 times. I didn't know what it was up until about 5 years ago when my uncle told me that little shed you've been looking at for your whole life, that's actually where your grandfather learned how to read. And so these things were always around me. I just never had a chance to actually touch them until the African American Museum. And I was telling the secretary, my children have been there more than they could count. And they're like, Dad, are we going back? And I'm like, well, they have a new Afrofuturism, you gotta see the Black Panther. Or if not, we're gonna go eat lunch and then we're gonna get out. We're gonna go to the store. Like, someone mentioned earlier, we have not founded an HBCU in I don't know how many years. To me, the African American Museum is the latest HBCU. To your point, if you take your time, don't just look at the art, read what the captions are, and process every exhibit, and then process that exhibit through the lens of the previous exhibit, and then connect with someone who's walking by and asking them and having those conversations with someone who doesn't look like you. You will get a master's degree, Mr. Secretary, in African American history. The way they curated, the way they put it together, the way that, and I will just shout it again, two of the most prominent education exhibits were what? Rosenwald School, the Hope School in South Carolina. They were very, very prominent artifacts. I think that, to me, is the most recently founded historically black college.
I think Curtis needs to be our spokesperson. Yeah, I like it. I love all the connections that you're making. I just want to remind everyone that we will have time for questions. I have one more question, and then
Can
we'll
I
open it
comment
up.
on something?
Absolutely, sir. Yes.
Oh, finally, I get to actually be in charge. I think you raised the important issue, and the important issue is, where are we today as a nation? I mean, I've always been struck that I was always taught that America was the home of the brave. But we're not brave enough to face our history. That, to me, really talks about a philosophical difference. And the difference is those that are afraid to face their history believe that America is at the promised land, is as high as it's going to get. Most other of us believe that America is a work in progress, that has these amazing ideals from founding mothers and fathers, but those ideals are often only made real by people who have challenged, who have died, who have sacrificed. So for me, telling those stories are not about assessing blame, although there's plenty of blame to go around, but it's really about saying, here is how a country is made better. Here is how you can hold a country accountable to live up to those ideals. Here's how you can understand those that ran away from slavery or those that marched for women's rights, because they have made the country more America than what America was in its beginning. And to me, being able to wrestle with that history is what will make you better. Running away from it will make you a coward and make you unable to affect the kind of change that lets America live up to its ideals. Okay, I'm really in trouble now, but that's okay. Okay.
Do not make me go after him again.
Can I get one more thing? And I think, again, this idea of censorship, students are missing out on a history.
100%.
I mentioned John Chavis, the first African American to ever attend college in America. He went back to North Carolina and became an educator. Some of his first students were white students. White families who said, this is an educated person, black or white, and my children can learn from them. One of his students went on to become a U.S. Senator from North Carolina. We have history of black men teaching all students going back 200 years. Parents saying, racism aside, this is something that's important to me because my child's future is important to me. And so this is an opportunity, I think, that's missed when we censor our education. Missed the idea that we could talk about, again, white abolitionists and white funders and Julius Rosenwald, who was a Jewish American who funded over 5,000 schools. Like, that's what we're missing out when we do this. And it's a disservice to our children, because generations from now, they're going to look back and saying, you did not believe in me, and I'm not prepared for the world because something you did that I didn't have control over. So believe in our children and believe in their future enough to give them the opportunity to learn everything about our history.
That's right. Absolutely. So if you're here in person and you have a question, there are 2 mics on each side of the aisles. And we have about 1,000 people who are joining us virtually online. So our online audience, if there's questions, Ashley's going to bring their voice into the room. So if you do have questions, go ahead and tee those up. So my last question before we open it up to the audience, as we think about, last week my team had the opportunity to spend time with the youth from the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, their leadership summit. I was so encouraged and inspired by these youth. They're so dynamic, aspirational, thoughtful. When I think about the youth, I'm not concerned at all about our future. When I think about the adults, we have some work to do, right? So we have about 4,000 people who will be joining us over the next 2 days, thinking about education and how to foster a sense of belonging for students. What would you encourage us to think about in our work and in our walk and what we do as we think about reaching and connecting with Black male youth and fostering that sense of belonging? What would be your encouragement for us? Jamar?
If you don't mind, I'd start. I don't want to go after these 2 again. I think let's really get down to what we're talking about here. Has anybody heard of us mentioning ELA or math? Right? Have we talked specifically about ELA or math class? I don't think we have. And I think we're talking about what kids need, and kids need more than that. Kids need more experiences. They need more time to process these experiences that they're going through, and they need more time to talk about them. One of the things that I love to do in my classroom is just talk to my students. How's your day? What'd you do? Or I like to talk about what's happening in the world. I think we, as educators and as educators, LEAs and DC Public Schools and charter schools, we need to really open our horizon and be vulnerable with our kids, right? We need to stop censoring the way that we are educating our kids, because as we are all talking about, it not only hinders our kids, but it's also us as adults. We're taking 10 more steps back every time we do that. And if you put, and I'm not good at math, I'm just gonna say it right now, but if you put, right, you put 20 people in a room and they're taking 10 steps back, who gets that math? It's a lot of steps back. Right? I want you to think about that. And so we have to really, if we're going to say that we're going to be in the 21st century and we're moving forward, we need to stop, 1, censoring with the things that we're doing, but also making sure that we are vulnerable. This experience that our kids went through this pandemic, not only did they experience it, we did too. And we have to share that. The moment that we isolate our own truths, as we are talking about, the moment that we isolate our own truths, we are telling our students to hide their truths too. And so all of these experiences are happening either outside of those academic classes, but they are real situations and experiences that our kids need to go through. So I would say kids need more. And they need more than just that academic piece. They need to be out at the museums. They need to be out on those fields. They need to be out walking the parks. They need to be out having those conversations with individuals that look like them, but that also don't look like them. And I need to recognize what that means and how important that is. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. That vulnerability. Thank you.
I wish you were my teacher, man.
Anything you gentlemen want to add?
I mean, I would add, of all things in my bio, I think I didn't mention that my father was a Marine and my mom was in the Air Force. And we grew up in a very patriotic family. I have family members who fought in really every war since the Revolutionary War. And I was able to join the Peace Corps and travel to South Africa and become an educator. And once I traveled overseas, I really felt that sense of what it meant to be an American. Like once you leave for a long period of time, it's sort of, comes down. And I think for me, I would ask you all the next few days, as we come out of, the celebration of Juneteenth, but also 4th of July in our country, what does it mean to be a patriot? What does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to you when we have in a segment of our community, people who also call themselves Americans, whose life is predicted by the zip code in which they're born? What does it mean to you to call yourself an American and to live beside someone who also calls themselves American, and their life outcomes are predicted by something they can't control? What does it mean to you being American when countries around the world are kicking our butt in education, in technology, in business, in national security? Those of you who are paying attention to education, come December, you're going to see the PISA results, which is a national comparison of countries. And American is probably going to be somewhere between 20th and 30th in math, reading, and science. And so I challenge you to ask yourself, is this the America that I want? And what can I do to say that if I'm truly patriotic, if I want to wave the flag and I want to sing the national anthem, that what does it mean when people who call themselves the same thing I call myself are seen as less than? And then what role do you play in ensuring it doesn't happen again? And so I ask you to question yourself, question what it means to be an American, and question what you can do to make this America the way we all expected it to be and fulfill its promise for all of us.
Well, my last comment is something, these are exceptional men. And what I think is powerful is, let us not be held captive by the exceptional. Let us realize that we all know a lot of people who were smarter than us, who were better athletes, who aren't here, who didn't get the opportunities we got. And I think the key for me is to realize that this is really about an endangered group of people. And that I think all of us here can say, if we had turned right instead of left, we wouldn't be here. If we had not listened to someone, or if we listened to someone else, we wouldn't be here. And so I think that this is really, in my mind, it is both a professional conversation and a personal need. And that in essence, this is something you know better than I. We're not talking abstract. We're talking about generations that don't get through the window that we got through. And that's wrong. And it's incumbent upon all of us to keep that window open, so that when we have other people sitting on this stage, it's not the exception, it's the rule.
So just really quickly, any questions for the panel? Yes, if you could go also to the mic, if you can make your way over there. And if there's anybody else who has a question, if you can make your way to the microphone. Ashley, any questions from the...
Yeah, from the virtual audience. There's a new school principal who is inheriting a lot of vacancies next school year. Sounds familiar, I think. What have you seen that's worked to support and retain male teachers of color and build and strengthen the pipeline?
Well, I would say, I get asked this question a lot. Roman Teach, we partner with school districts, nonprofits, to really amplify opportunities and to build from our community. In a phrase, use what you got. Some flyer with some model or on the front is not going to do it. You have to hear from the Jamar in your school, a personal story from an individual who's worked in that building, who can speak to the experience of what it means to be an educator in that building. When I first became a school teacher in Prince George's County at Oxon Hill Middle School, I was offered a job by 3 other schools. And unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to interview other educators in those schools to find out what it was like, how open were they to me being myself and vice versa. But for us at Roman Teach, it's really opportunity. We say, do you have any black male educators in your building? We only have one. I said, well, one is all we need. We want to amplify him. We want him to be the poster child for your building so that others want to be like him. It's not a model. It's not some figure who may look nice, but does not know what it's like to be in that building. And so people have options. They can choose to work where they want, and a lot of schools have options, but you have to sell your school as the one place they can fully see themselves and fully actualize the work, their subject matter, and everything they love about children. So I would say amplify those you have and let them be your ambassadors.
We're going to go to the next question, but Curtis, can you take 1 minute to tell us about Real Men Teach and what you kind of help to facilitate in that space?
So Real Men Teach is a national conversation. It started in my school district. When I was on the school board in Prince George's County. We started with the Male Educator Network, bringing men together, just have a conversation about what it meant to be educators. From that, we started doing workshops on how to advocate to the school district, how to interview for a job outside of the classroom, how to partner with nonprofits, and then we did a celebration where we honored one male educator from every school. So over the course of 6 years, we honored over 1,200 male educators. We had, NBC, and what we'd always hear is male educators say, Curtis, I don't do it for the recognition, but damn it feels good to be recognized. It does. All the male educators in this room, you all know, it's a thankless job. The expectations are high. We don't get a lot of appreciation. But when we get that thank you, it matters. And so what we do is we partner with school districts, again, to amplify. We're an information hub, like the LinkedIn for black male educators. If you want information on where to find a scholarship, on where to find a fellowship, on where to find a job, on where to find research, you go to realmenteach.com. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. We have you surrounded. We want you to see positive images of black male educators every day. You start following us on LinkedIn, you're going to get sick of us. But what you're going to see is, how you see us is going to change. It's not going to be the traditional ways that social media and television and the news portrays us. You're going to see images of people like Jamar and Secretary Bunch and me all day long. And you will see how it changes how you view us, but also that sense of collective teacher efficacy, that sense of belonging, and that sense of seeing, wow, this student looks like Jamar and vice versa. If he's anything like Jamar in him, I need to rethink about how I educate him. And one thing I challenge teachers, teach like the future president is in your classroom.
Oh, that's good.
Because you don't know, because it could be. And you teach up to all of those students. Barack Obama came from a single parent home. Nowadays, a young black boy from a single parent home is looked at as less than. If those teachers knew he was going to be president, how would they have taught him differently? Would they have said differently? Don't miss your opportunity to do so.
Hello, thank you for this discussion. My name is Dr. Gailda Davis. Recognizing there's a line, let me keep this brief. All right, my field is post-secondary education. The students that are in many of your classrooms today will be on our campuses tomorrow. I am both grieved and concerned about the path our nation is currently on, particularly when I think about the impact of our current context around anti-DEI legislation, around censorship, around academic freedom, and how things are being translated, institutions that are being told to dismantle their work on diversity, equity, and inclusion that has been so instrumental in creating a sense of belonging to so many of our students, even reflecting on my own trajectory in higher education. And so I'm interested in the panel's thoughts on how higher education institutions need to be thinking about potentially responding to what we're seeing nationally, and not just from the perspective of campuses as places for education, as spring wells for the future minds of leaders, but also as institutions that are positioned to serve the greater good in our communities. What should higher education be doing to help, to support, to advance the need for a sense of belonging in spaces that, that currently are being asked to kind of shuts those down.
Does anyone want to take that?
Do you want to take a few at a time, so it's faster, or you want to take one at a time? I mean, I think it's probably faster if we take 2 or 3 at a time.
I can see a teacher here.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
I'm
I
happy
do
to
this too.
adjust. Let's go ahead and get a couple of them into the space. So, higher education. What can higher education do?
Hi, my name is Michaela Bush. I'm so honored to learn from you all. I have noticed that I always like to ask a question like this in these spaces, which is educators are always tasked either through teaching, learning, and development to pay attention to what we are teaching students, and you will often find that students teach you a lot as well. And so my question for each of you would be, what have you learned from your students, particularly your Black male students, that's really important, and how do you carry those lessons to inform what is the most important work to be done?
Okay, let's tackle those two. So, higher education, what is the role, what can they do, and what have you learned from your students?
I'll just lead us off. So I think, to go back to the higher education, I think we need more ambassadors like you. We need more individuals who are willing to stand with you to not only create either events or ways that you can engage students respectfully, but also make sure that your voice is heard. I think in a lot of situations, we feel as educators in general that our voice is not heard, but we also do this thing where we are thinking the next person's going to do it. I always use this kind of metaphor is like if everybody's in a room that's talking and having a conversation, and you're having a conversation with this person, that person's having a conversation with that person, can you hear what somebody's saying? But if we're all saying the same thing, if we're all talking in one direction, if we're all pitching the same idea, you can hear what we're saying. And so that's what I would leave you with if you want to jump on.
Now, I mean, again, I mentioned I'm on faculty at the University of Maryland, College Park, and I was just really excited about something the President Pines did recently, where he said that if you're a student from the state of Maryland and you're Pell eligible and you get into the University of Maryland, hook or crook, it's free tuition for 4 years. University of North Carolina did the same thing. Chapel Hill did the same thing. And so income and race and upbringing cannot be a barrier to identifying the best and brightest. We have to see those who don't have opportunities as the next inventors, the people who we're missing out on. And so I think that's incredibly important. I think I've also taught at the community college level, at Prince George's County Community College, where I taught. They have a specific program called the Diverse Male Student Initiative. And there's a number of programs around the country that are specifically serving Black males. And they're working with them twice a week for the entire time they're there. The graduation rate for students who go through that program is 75% compared to roughly half of that from traditional community college students. So to answer that, be deliberate, be intensive, be unapologetic about programs that you put in to support all students, but also put your money where your mouth is. And understand that there are students who are going to get this scholarship that President Pines put out, and they're going to go off and change the world. They're going to come back and say, if it wasn't for this scholarship, I wouldn't be here. But let's not wait for that to happen. Wait for them to come back 20 years from now and tell that story. Look at every student as a potential change maker and someone whose opportunity is only at the other side of this education and this school, and money could be a barrier. If we're not being deliberate about that, then we're paying lip service to all this talk about an inclusive society and one America.
Okay, I hate to do this because we're running out of time. I'm going to ask you guys to rock, paper, scissors over there. And figure out who gets to ask the last question.
Oh my
Rock,
God.
paper, scissors.
Did you win? Or you just didn't try?
Rock, paper, scissors.
Okay, we'll talk after. Okay.
Did you win, Shauna?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was really nice and just gave me the opportunity.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, evening everyone. Dr. Shauna Knox with the National Black Child Development Institute. I think this is a really important conversation, and I wrote down my question, so I'm going to read it. Okay, so we all waited a really long time to have a Black Smithsonian because of how critical it was to democratize Black knowledge and Black epistemologies, Black ways of knowing. And right now, we're watching that Black knowledge and that history disappear. And so on this stage right now, I'm seeing a cross-section of public education, of the whole education ecosystem. We have public teachers, we have public school movements, the institutions for public knowledge. So I think it's the right time to ask the question of what the moral imperative is for all of us in responding to the disappearance of Black knowledge. What does the moment demand of us all collectively right now? And I'm just curious about what's keeping you up at night, what's in your mind about, if we all came together and created a narrative strategy or did X or Y, I could really see that moving the needle.
And I'm going to take a point of privilege and give Secretary Bunch the last word on this question.
Okay.
And then do you want to answer William Reed's question?
We'll talk afterwards.
So it seems to me there are several things. First of all, one of the great strengths of the Smithsonian is by building the National Museum of African American History and Culture, it means that as long as there's an America, that museum's there. So that counters whatever else is being said. But I think what you've really raised is something crucially important, and that is to recognize that it is really about the greater good, but it also means that we have to realize that it's not enough to be smart and it's not enough to be right, that you've got to be political, that you've got to remember the words of Frederick Douglass, that you agitate, agitate, agitate. And through that agitation, you make sure that what you believe in is seen, supported, and moved forward. The reality is that it's a real debate, and we've got to be willing to engage in that debate, to raise the issues, not to say they're wrong or they're uneducated, but to say, here's how we believe we could move a country forward. And I think that opportunity to be strategic, be political, and be smart is really the key to our success in the future.
I'm going to wrap us up really quickly after Curtis says his last word.
I just want to thank the Secretary for what he does, and I wanted to present him with one of our Real Men t-shirts. And so
I love it. I love it. You guys look good.
And so if you go to our website, we actually call this the Bison because we have it in Howard's colors, and all the proceeds from our apparel go to scholarships for Black and brown male educators. And so I just wanted to do that.
So can you join me in thanking our amazing panel? So for those of you here in person, the festivities do not end. We have exhibits that are open, especially for you tonight. There's 6 exhibits open on all 3 levels. There's some fabulous food stations and reception, fairs.
Say that real clear.
Teachers, food, free drinks. And please make sure to join us tomorrow for our opening keynote with Rebecca Peterson, who will kick us off in the morning. Thank you. Thank you.